Hello and welcome to this episode of I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, where today I'm going to ask you the question, do you hug your children too much? So the big question is this: how are parents like us, who don't have a manual, who are doing the best we can, who feel as though we aren't enough, how are we going to raise healthy, happy children who we are proud of and still keep our sanity in that process? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Ryan Roy, and welcome to I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, a podcast for parents who are being real with themselves. Hello and welcome back to this episode of I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, where today I am posing the question, do you hug your children too much? So I'm listening to an audiobook right now, and then in correspondence with another episode of Super Nanny that my son has grown accustomed to watching. He actually loves the show, and he's like, why are these parents doing this? Why do those kids act like that? And as she coaches these parents into, a better situation for themselves and a better environment for their kids, one thing I noticed as an observer of parents, and I pointed it out to my son just this morning, I said, when they're having these altercations, when the kids are not behaving, what do you notice the parents are doing? He says they're yelling, they're hitting. I said, do you think that would feel good to you if daddy did that stuff to you? And he's like, no. I said, it doesn't feel good to those kids either. What they're getting is a lot of negative reinforcement, but they're not getting a lot of love. I said, and one of the things Super Nanny does when these kids get their form of discipline that she puts into place is she tells the kids first they get a warning, then they get their punishment or whatever you want to call it. It's usually a timeout or something. Get sat in a chair or get sat in a space, and they know that they have to stay there for a certain amount of minutes. And then when that time is up, you go there and you tell the child that you love them, and then you give them a hug, or you give them a hug and a kiss. And I said, notice, there was a point where Super Nanny was coaching the mom and says, this is how you do this. She's like, thank you for staying here. I hope you understand what you did. I still care for you. I still love you. Now come give me a hug. And as she put out her arms, this kid, his whole body language is like, I don't want to listen to you. Until she put out her arms, even without asking for the hug. As soon as he saw the arms reaching out for him, he turned very quickly and leaned into someone who's not even his mother. And I rewound it and I showed my son. I said, watch the body language. Now you guys may be thinking I'm crazy over here, but that kid is starved for love and affection. And that's what she's trying to retrain. Like, if you're doing bad behavior, you're going to have to pay a consequence, but mommy, daddy still love you. And here, I want to show you by telling you, and physically showing you by giving you an embrace. So I looked at my son and I said, how many times do I hug you a day? He's like, 1 million. I said, because I want you to know that you're loved. I said, daddy needs those hugs just as much as you need those hugs. I said, what's the first thing you do in the morning? Usually I'm downstairs with the baby before he gets up. So what's the first thing you do every single morning when you come down? He goes, I jump on you and I hug you. I said, and I love that. I said, what is the last thing we do every single night before we go to bed? He's like, we do daddy talk time and we hug each other. I said, that's because I want you to know when you go to bed and when you get up that you're loved. And I don't ever want you to forget it. I said, so I don't believe that there can be too much love in the form of hugs as long as it's mutual. Which brings to another point. One of the children didn't want to hug his mom in the moment, and she didn't allow it. So the book I'm reading, or listening to, I don't read many books these days, listen to a lot of audios, but they talk about emotional intelligence. We have the IQ, but we also have an EQ, which is your emotional intelligence. And what she's talking about here is showing your children that it's okay to have emotions, that they're still loved when they have emotions. And then they start to, as long as you show empathy for them and where they're at, like, it's okay that you're crying right now. It's okay that you're hurt right now. It's okay to feel those emotions right now. Mommy, daddy feels those emotions sometimes too. Whatever the emotion is, whether it's happy, sad, whatever it may be. But then I was reading on a string on Reddit. Yes, guys, this is all like within the last 12 hours. I tend to read a parenting string on Reddit in the morning. I will listen to my audiobook before I go to bed. And it's become a family tradition the last couple weeks to watch Super Nanny first thing in the morning. And it's not me. My 7-year-old son is fascinated by this show because he's fascinated by why kids are not behaving. It's foreign to him. I like it because he actually gets to see all the work that my wife and I are doing to make sure that he has a safe place to live and feels loved, and that may not be the case everywhere. But I want him to understand other people and learn to have empathy and sympathy for other people's situations. And we can't do that if we don't witness it. But what the book says is kids need to witness that. They need to learn to adapt. And what happens is, when your kids are sad, you go and give them a hug and you comfort them, they learn to mimic that behavior. So when they see a friend that's sad, they will go and hug their friend, or they will say, "Is everything all right? I'm here to listen. I'm here to comfort you." And we want that for our children. We want them to have emotional intelligence. But we must demonstrate that emotional intelligence. It goes on to say that if you haven't worked through things, that you can't share your emotions, how can you teach your children to have their emotions? So, one of the more recent podcasts I did was, your kids suck because you suck. Your kids can only be as good as you when you are the sole provider for knowledge and learning skills. So if you don't have your skills up to par, if you aren't going out there and actively looking for ways, and I'm not talking to my audience, you guys are actually listening to this podcast. But when you see other parents struggling, it's because they haven't acquired the skills, the knowledge, the skills and knowledge it takes to be a successful parent. Now, 50 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, prior to the internet and an ungodly amount of information that we could sift through and sort through, there may have been an excuse not to have that, because you just either learned from your parents or witnessed somebody else or learned some old wives' tales. But we now have the internet, which is an abundance of information. Hence why I have a podcast, because this information can get out there. So go out there and educate yourself. That's chapter 1 of my book, Be the Dad You Wish You Had. Educate yourself. Learn what it is to be a good parent. Read so much that you can start to discern what information out there tends to be repeated. And if it's repeated early and often, guess what? It must probably be pretty good. So let's get back to this Reddit feed that I was talking about. And it's talks about emotional intelligence, and one of the things it said is when children are going through an experience, no matter whether positive or negative in regards to their feelings, what this parent said, and ton of feedback on it, and it's just simply simple yet brilliant, is to teach emotion. Right? We need to teach our kids about emotion. And some people, how do you teach someone about emotion? You need to teach them, and it was as simple as this. The example that was used in this feed is if my son or daughter is having an ice cream and they're smiling, hey, I noticed that when you have ice cream, it seems to make you happy. And right, you just point out that emotion so that they can discern what happiness is. Or, hey, when you bumped your knee and you scraped it, you seem to be sad, right? It hurt. You're sad about not being able to go play with your friends because now your knee is hurt. And you just point these things out. Now, on the opposite end of that, let's say a kid scrapes or bumps their knee and a parent says, oh, you're fine. That's actually not in alignment with how they're feeling. Does that make sense? No, I'm not fine. My knee hurts. But when you're telling them they should be fine or not to worry about it, well, I am worried about it. My knee hurts, and what my emotions are telling me is not in alignment with what the person I trust most, or persons I trust most, my parents in the world, that's not in alignment. And that creates confusion around their emotions. And then later on, they suppress their emotions because they think they should be, quote unquote, just fine. But they don't feel that internally. And then it's not okay for them to express that outwardly because they've been told they should be fine. So acknowledge their emotions, whatever they may be. If their little brother or little sister, right? This is something that I know my son has gone through a little bit. The older one is, hey, you seem to get what's called jealous when I pay attention to your little brother, and you kind of nudge in and say, hey, Dad, can you look at this? And I know that he's begging for attention, but I will often say, and I've never done this because I just read this morning, but I'll often say, hey, right now, I'm playing with your brother. You're important too. And as soon as I'm done here, I want to pour into you also. But what I could say is, you know how you feel when you're watching me with your brother? And then you want to come over and you want some of my attention too? That emotion is a little bit of jealousy, and that's okay. We all have that emotion, right? I think, as I'm saying it, I could picture the parents out there saying, well, you don't want them to understand jealousy. Yes, you do. You do want them to understand jealousy. And because that's what teaching your kids are. You're teaching them the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. You're teaching them life skills. And the more they understand, because we're willing to take the time, the better off we'll be. And I had to do this just yesterday. I was reading to his brother. He came over. He's like, Dad, check out this Lego thing. And I said, whoa, slow down, buddy. I'm in the middle of reading a book to your brother. I'll play Legos with you. I promise your brother 2 books. We're halfway through this first one. Mind you, he's 1.5. These books aren't long. I said, and then I'll come play with you. But what I could have said is, you know, what does that make you feel like when I'm hanging out with your brother and your brother alone and you want my attention? And he wouldn't be able to put it into words. Well, that emotion a lot of times is called jealousy. And then we give him a hug because hugs aren't too much. See, I don't know jack about parenting, people. I just know this. I know that our kids need our love and our attention. I also know that if we're not giving that, we're often giving something opposite of that, which is not love and attention, which turns into chaos in the household because they're vying for that love and attention. Again, I don't know jack about parenting, but I know too many hugs really doesn't exist in our family, and I hope that it will become a trend in your family. Hug your kids early, often. Show them that you love them through your physical attention as well as your words. Chapter 36. Tell them I love you every single day of Be the Dad You Wish You Had. And you can get your free copy of that book at BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com/free book. We'll see you in the next episode. Do you want to be the dad you wish you had? If so, go get my free book, Be the Dad You Wish You Had, at BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com. Inside, you'll find my most effective 40 tips to quickly and easily transform yourself into the ideal dad. Go to BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com now and get it while it's free.